In this episode of Tile TV, we're going to talk a little bit about layout. So one of the first things we do with layout is figure out what our tile sizing is, our tile plus joints. So this is kind of a basic tile 101 on layout. So as you begin tiling, if you're fairly new to the tile industry and you're starting, one of the first things you'll more than likely be installing tile on, old school, is 4 1/4. So 4 1/4 is what we started tiling with. So if you stack them up flat, butt to butt, these tiles all have a lug on the side of them. That is a built-in spacer to separate them to leave enough of a joint for grout to get in. So we've got our tiles spaced. Make sure your tiles are straight also. So I've got them on a bench to make them flat to one another. And so then we're going to figure out our tile. So we're at 4 1/4, 8 1/2, 12 3/4 a little strong because they grow a little bit with size, 17 1/8, 21 3/8 a little bit strong, 25 almost 3/4, and then here's our magic number. It's 30 inches. Why is that the magic number? That's easy to remember. So as we do our layout, if we have a number that's easy to do the math within our head, so like 24 inches, that's our 2-foot mark on our tape measure, so then we can always do our math by that. With 4 1/4, our magic number is about 30 inches. So you can measure even like a 25-foot long wall like I've got over here, and as long as you know every 30 inches, you'll know what size cut you end up with. So one of the easiest things to do with our layout is plumb, level, square. That's always important. And then also knowing what our tile layout is. That's a very important factor in starting your layout. Well, we're going to talk about one of the very basics with our tile layout, and that is centering a wall. The standards are very clear, very minimal on what the standards on layout is. They want your pattern to be centered and balanced. So in other words, you should have equal cuts on both sides of your wall and no cut less than 1/2. So that's what we're going to try and do. So first thing we want to do is center a wall. So normally I'll do this. I will take my tape measure, and I will, if it doesn't fold over like that on me, I will find out the total size of this wall. And it's 135 3/4 is the full length of that wall. So that is running at about 67 7/8. So there I've made a little mark at 67 7/8. And I don't trust my math all the time. I will go back and I will check the other way to make sure I'm at 67 7/8. So I'm right on the money. So that's right exactly center of the wall. So now I know 30 is good, so 60 is good. But sometimes if it's a really long wall, you might have a long distance to cover. Sometimes I like just to use the end of my tape measure, hold my tape on the 30-inch mark, and just score the wall. Make a score like this on the wall. I know that's at 30 inches. Then I'll come back in here and do another 30 inches. That's my next mark at 30. So now I know 4 1/4 is my next size. So that tells me I've got a 3 1/2 inch cut here, and I'll have a 3 1/2 inch cut down at the other side. So that makes sure that my cuts on both ends are centered and balanced. And so I can plumb this line up, start from the middle and go both ways, and that'll make sure my wall is centered and balanced. So that's how you center a wall. If I happen to come up and I had a cut that was less than 2 1/8 inches, which is half of 4 1/4, I would then shift this. But since I ended up with a cut bigger than 2 1/8, which is a half a tile, I left that right where it's at. I end up with a 3 1/2 inch cut on both sides. It'll be centered, balanced. It'll look good when it's all done. Okay, so then that lays us out side to side on the wall, but we also want to know top to bottom, what are our cuts going to be? So I snapped out this line out of full tile. I've got a Sluter strip or a metal profile at the bottom. And as I work up, that's about the 42 7/8, so that's full tile there. So then all I have to do is measure up to the ceiling. So we know I'm at 60 inches is a full tile. So at 60 inches, that's a full tile. So then the rest of the way up, I've got almost 16 7/8, 17 1/8 is full tile. So that means I'm taking off about a 1/4 inch at the top. So the bottom is a full tile, the top is off about a 1/4 inch. That's almost helpful because then that allows me to cut the ceiling in because they're not always perfect. So that gives me a little bit of room to cut in the ceiling. So when you're doing your layout, you want to check left to right, but also top to bottom to make sure your cuts, so you don't end up with a tiny sliver at the top. If so, now's the time to find that out and then figure out, does your owner, architect, designer want to put a half tile or a little over half tile at the bottom to increase the size of the cut at the top if you had ended up with a little sliver. We're not, we're almost ending with almost a full tile, so we're in good shape there. So you want to check side to side, left to right, and top to bottom when you're doing your layout, and you want to make sure you're centered and balanced, no cuts less than a half. Thank you.